All right, I'm going to talk really fast then. There's a couple things I do want to talk about, and again, to hit them both, I'm going to be very brief on the first one, and that is 702, to reemphasize the importance of that. Thanks for all of you being here. We recognize that each of you are distinguished leaders. If I could make this point in introduction to 702, all of us are responsible to the people, but those of us sitting up here have a special responsibility to the people. We go home every weekend and we talk with hundreds of people. I think we have a pulse on where the people are, far more than the executive, far more than military or intelligence officials, and I would say far more than the Senate. And so I think we have a pulse of the people, and in that regard then, when we talk about 702 and the fear and concern they have, with Director Wray, if I could, I'm going to read you a communication I had from a constituent who is a national security expert official. And then I'd ask you to respond, or maybe you don't want to, but I read this to you to illustrate this is the challenge we have when it comes to reauthorizing. And much of this is shared by members of Congress as well, but quoting from him, we could show dozens of examples. Sending FBI agents to shut down local prosecutors for going after Jeff Epstein, systemic abuse of Fisa, systemic abuse of First Amendment rights, targeting parents and Catholics, refusing to investigate multiple reports of sexual abuse of U.S. gymnasts. The problem is, speaking of the FBI, they have no accountability, near absolute power, and they know no one, not even Congress, can touch them. That is what many, many Americans feel. And now we have to go to them and say, yeah, we understand your concerns, but at the same time, we want to reauthorize these powers and authorities. I read that for you, as we discussed earlier, as a challenge we have. You're welcome to respond to it, although please do so briefly, or if you just recognize, yeah, we need to admit to the American people that we've made mistakes and we're going to correct it.
So, Congressman, I appreciate you sharing your constituent's letter with me. What I would say is, of course, like any major institution, we have made mistakes. Some of the descriptions in the constituent's letter are not accurate in terms of what actually happened, but absolutely we have made mistakes. And to me, the mark of a leading organization is not whether it makes mistakes or not. All major organizations, all elite organizations do, but whether or not we learn from those mistakes. And I think we have. We've made all sorts of changes, which I could go into on different issues, but we're determined to be worthy of all Americans' trust, including your constituents.
Well, and I appreciate that, because that's where we're going to find success, is if we can say that we recognize that we can do better. And to do better, the process has got to be reformed somewhat. And we look forward to working with you, because we do have to reauthorize 702. Director Haynes, this is to you. I think you're probably most appropriate to answer this. Now, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about here. We look forward to the closed hearing, as I said, but we have to talk about China. I reflect back on my military experience. There were a number of incidents, a couple times when we had American assets, American intelligence aircraft who were captured and had a forced landing in China. The P-3 incident with the J-8 is an example. And during that time, we didn't really know what our policy would be, how the U.S. would respond. In the past, the president has said pretty clearly that we would respond with military action if China were to invade Taiwan. And then shortly after that, the administration kind of walked back those comments, but it didn't occur just once, it occurred several times. We have this policy of strategic ambiguity, which has served us well for the last 30 years. But I wonder if it's not time for us to declare another policy, a new policy, and that is we will defend Taiwan. It's pretty clear the president seems to think that. And I think if we're going to deter, again, understanding the need for strategic ambiguity before, but times are different now. If we're going to deter, I think we have to be clear in saying, yes, we will defend Taiwan militarily if we have to. Director, am I wrong? And has there been a change in the administration's policy regarding ambiguity?
Thank you, Congressman. I'm obviously not in a position to comment on policy, but I think you're right in recognizing the president's comments on this issue, and that has been a pretty strong statement.
Okay, so let me, in the 13 seconds I have, do we agree that there would be stronger deterrence if our adversaries knew that we would defend militarily if necessary?
You mean sort of, in this particular case, I think it is clear to the Chinese what our position is based on the president's comments.
Thank you. And I only went 10 seconds over, Mr. Chairman, so I yield back.
Very, very good. Mr. Christian Worthley.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Himes, for unearthing evidence of free snacks at the NSA. We'll be visiting shortly, General Nakasone. My first question is directed to Director Wray. Mr. Wray, you've said that TikTok, the popular app on people's phones, is, quote, a tool that is ultimately within the control of the Chinese government, and it screams out with national security concerns, close quote. We found that TikTok and ByteDance employees regularly engage in a practice called heating, close in quotes, heating, a manual push that ensures specific videos, quote, achieve a certain number of video views. Mr. Wray, can you rule out that TikTok is heated content at the direction of the CCP?
I don't think we could rule that out.
Can you, now let me just talk about another instance of what I think is very problematic behavior at TikTok and ByteDance, their parent company. In December of last year, ByteDance confirmed it used TikTok to monitor U.S. journalists' physical location using their IP addresses in an attempt to identify whether they had been located by ByteDance employees. Can you rule out that this data was also shared with the CCP?
I don't think we could rule that out.
Could the CCP use TikTok to shape political opinion, such as to misinform the American public?
What you just described there is one of the concerns that we have, namely that the control of the recommendation algorithm could be used to conduct influence operations. And much along the lines of your first two questions, it's important to understand that that's not something that would be easily detected or ruled out, as you say. And that's just one of several security concerns that we have about TikTok.
Thank you. Director Haynes, recently my staff described to me a term called guangzi. Apparently, guangzi is a Chinese term that refers to a part of Chinese culture where people develop personal trust and a strong relationship that can involve moral obligations in exchange of favors. And they suggested in the press, there's been suggestions that guangzi has developed between Chairman Xi and Vladimir Putin. Let me ask you this question. Do we have any evidence that in Chairman Xi's calculations of potentially providing military assistance to Russia in Ukraine, that he has ever discussed, or he has discussed among his internal cadres, potential assistance by Russia to China and the PRC in a potential invasion of Taiwan?
Thank you, Congressman. I think maybe we could discuss this in closed session.
Okay, very good. General Barrier, I want to talk to you about something called peace disease, which has Chairman Xi has talked about repeatedly in his speeches recently. This is what a former general of the Central Military Commission and the PRC has described as peace disease. He said, quote, "Today the PLA hasn't been in actual combat for many years, yet the fires of war are burning throughout the world. In this area, the gap between the PLA and foreign militaries is growing day by day." And then he closes with the quote, "This is an actual problem," close quote. This was a quote from a 2009 speech by the general of the Shenyang military region. This term, peace disease, refers to supposedly a lack of combat readiness on the part of the PLA, has appeared 565 times in the PLA Daily between 2012 and mid-2018, and just recently Xi Jinping said he wants to cure the peace disease. How do you assess when Chairman Xi would know that the peacetime disease has been cured and that their troops are ready for combat?
I'm not sure that we could actually put a fixed date on that. We know there are a few dates out there like 2027, 2035, and 2049. And we know that his leaders don't have the kind of combat experience that, say, the American military leaders have. So we think that this is in his mind, and perhaps shapes the way that he thinks about the readiness of his force. And we could probably go into a few more details on that in a closed session.
Very good. Director Burns, I wanted to ask you a question about threats from ChatGPT, but I just couldn't think of any. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, ask question of CIA Director Burns about threats from ChatGPT. It said, Director Burns, what measures is the CIA taking to monitor and mitigate potential risks associated with the use of AI language models like ChatGPT? And how would you prevent AI language models not to be used by malicious actors to spread false information or influence public opinion? That's from my pal, ChatGPT.
Sure, I'm glad to give you an example, which I'm sure ChatGPT is very well aware of, and that is that, you know, if you assume, say, an adversarial intelligence service where English is not the first language, and they're thinking about ways in which they could come up with compelling spear phishing messages, it's logical to use artificial intelligence of one kind or another to produce a message that can be pretty effective in spear phishing and therefore in taking advantage of vulnerabilities. And so what we're working on with colleagues across the intelligence community are ways of identifying, you know, when that kind of spear phishing effort is being made using artificial intelligence by a foreign adversary.
Thank you.
Biển chiều hôm đã trao anh dạt dào bao kỷ niệm, như vầng trăng sáng to giữa khơi xa, như hàng dương gió reo suốt bốn mùa. Em yêu anh như yêu bờ cát trắng, lòng lo âu khi mùa bão qua đây. Em yêu anh như yêu câu vĩ dặm, dần đi dần mà thương cũng thật nhiều. Ngoài khơi xa đang có gì đợi anh, lúc phong ba biển động sóng gầm gào. Em chờ anh thức trọn suốt canh thâu, như dòng sông lúc với rồi lại đây. Anh yêu ơi thương anh nhiều lắm đó, đừng đi xa như loài cá lang thang. Em yêu anh, em thương anh vất vả, dần thì dần mà thương cũng thật nhiều, dần thì dần mà thương lại càng thương. Tình yêu em như sóng biển chiều hôm đã trao anh dạt dào bao kỷ niệm, như vầng trăng sáng to giữa khơi xa, như hàng dương gió reo suốt bốn mùa. Em yêu anh như yêu bờ cát trắng, lòng lo âu khi mùa bão qua đây. Em yêu anh như yêu câu vĩ dặm, dần đi dần gào. Em chờ anh thức trọn suốt canh thâu, như dòng sông lúc với rồi lại đây. Anh yêu ơi thương anh nhiều lắm đó, đừng đi xa như loài cá lang thang. Em yêu anh, em thương anh vất vả, giận thì giận mà thương cũng thật nhiều, giận thì giận mà thương lại càng